And here's the clown.
Oh, that's why you're such a star.
Okay, hey guys. So today we thought we would start a new series about how to know you're actually a certain MBTI type, and we thought we'd start off with INFPs. So we see that there's a lot of mistyping in the community, right? So we thought we would approach this by kind of explaining how to know you're an INFP, and also how to know that you might actually be one of the other common types that people usually think they're INFP, but are actually something else.
Just from my observation, the most common types to think that they're INFP is INTP and ISFJ for whatever reason.
And sometimes INFJs too type as INFPs.
Sure. I'm sure you guys have read so much about INFPs on the internet, so I wanted to give a list of ways to tell you're an INFP that are really unexpected. So I'm just going to go through them. If you're truly an INFP, you're probably constantly questioning your own type. I feel like even now I can maybe say I'm like 99.9% sure, but I've definitely gone through multiple periods in my life of doubting and questioning my type. Sometimes I meet INFPs who are not really INFPs and they're enamored with the INFP persona. They're like, no, I'm 100% sure I'm a feeler, perceiver, I'm like a fairy, la la la. The auxiliary in E of INFPs would make it really hard to settle on one type. And you see this in INTPs too. Usually they question their own type and they question everything.
Right. And this probably isn't also the fault of these people. It's also just that probably INFPs is one of the types that are played up to these really positive stereotypes, whereas some other types are maybe played to like these really bad stereotypes, so it's part of it too.
A lot of real INFPs that I've spoken to, they think that they're not INFP, and I've thought this in the past too, because we don't live up to that thing, that stereotype that is existing out in the world. Like, I don't feel like I'm idealistic enough, or I don't feel like I'm good-hearted enough. As dominant judges, we're really harsh on ourselves, and we constantly try to measure if we're really up to standard. So the other thing, what I find with dominant introverted judging is that you want to be kind of right about it. What INFPs will do is figure out their own stance on different aspects of life, but they actually want that to be the right one for them. Like, they don't want to just pick one that they like. There's also a lot of analysis involved. A lot of INFPs, I know they're like, oh, I'm not a feeler because I don't just feel like doing this and I do it. It's actually, introverted feeling is a lot more complex than that.
Yeah, exactly. It's ultimately a judging function, so it's about like evaluating information and analyzing it, right? It's not just about like, oh, I have a feeling, I'm gonna do my feeling, or like knowing what your feelings are all the time, or like acting on your feelings. I think it can be related to feelings in that you can value your own feelings, right? So that you might listen to them more, but not always, right?
Yeah. They are often afraid of and even distrustful of their own feelings. This is because they're TE aspirational. So they idealize TE, they're quite often attracted to TE users, and consciously a lot of FI users, they might value logic. When they're feeling things, they might be really questioning that and questioning if it's right. If you see some INFPs and they're like, oh yeah, feelings rule, like they're enamored with feeling, then they might not actually be an INFP. Another common thing with INFPs is that they will read endlessly about different interests that they have and other people's interests, and it would take forever before they actually decide to try it.
Right, so maybe like a more dominant NE user would just like act more on that.
This is also a SE polar thing. It's just, we want to be so prepared and we want to know everything about everything before we actually plunge into the action itself.
Right.
Most INFPs will be perceptive towards other people's feelings. It just kind of happens subconsciously, but we don't necessarily want to change them, and usually don't because we're FI users. INFPs often don't really like conflict and dislike hurting other people, and this can often be seen as FE, and a lot of true INFPs ironically think that they're FE users, but it's just a normal FI value to have, not hurting other people unnecessarily. I just remembered it's my birthday today on this video. It's my birthday and I'm an INFP. Okay, this video is thanks to all the comments that I get saying that I'm ENFP. So many ENFP comments, guys. I'm like so tired of it. And also ISFP and ESFP, which is kind of interesting because apparently no one thinks I'm FJ. Thanks for saying I have no FE. Thank you. And it is not easy to determine the first letter. It's the hardest letter out of all of the 4 letters to determine. But here's how I know that I'm an INFP. Basically, I mean, you can ask questions about how often I stay home, how often I go out, and stuff like this. But really, the only reliable thing is, do I use FI more or NE more? Like, am I generally introverted in energy, meaning I use introverted feeling and sensing, or extroverted in energy, meaning I use extroverted intuition and thinking? Oh, that's just like, you are an INFP. Yeah. I always like to tell this one story. Yeah, me and Alex are at this party. Someone starts talking about ghosts and spirits, and dominant perceiver, as in the case of an ENFP, and Alex actually, because she's a dominant perceiver, will listen to all the new data that they're sharing. This person was giving one argument after the other. It was really like 12 arguments in a row of why like ghosts exist. But like by the first one, I already decided, like I basically judged the situation. I was like, I already decided that I don't believe it. So I was physiologically listening, but I wasn't really like cognitively listening anymore. But yeah, dominant perceivers, like Alex listened to all the arguments.
Well, generally I find supernatural stuff interesting. Like I don't think I necessarily believe it, but I will listen to it endlessly because I'm fascinated about whether it is true or not. And yeah, so that's kind of like, yeah, the perceiver judger difference.
Oh yeah, I was like, this does not apply to my life. Bye. I still had to sit at the table, but I was like, nah, off into dream world I go.
A lot of INFPs, real INFPs, might think they're an FE user because maybe they try to like take care of other people's needs or are just generally nice to people. So this kind of is like a learned behavior and not an innate part of your cognitive function. So you can be INFP and still seek to like help other people out or be kind to other people or be aware of other people's emotional needs and things like that. So that's not necessarily an FE thing. I just wanted to say that. And then, okay. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I just realized I have a interesting comment about this. So as an INFP, I could see how I would think that I'm an FE user because, for example, if I say something mean and someone else is upset, I can be so upset. But it's not exactly empathy in this case. It's like sometimes FE users, the other person is upset, making the atmosphere upset, and then they get upset. But then for me, it's more like I see myself as the cause of this, and because I said the mean thing, I did something wrong by my moral standpoint internally, and therefore I feel bad for doing the bad thing. So it's like a really subtle difference, but it's a huge difference to determine if you're FI or FE.
If you want to see more on the difference between FE and FI, we made a separate video on that, so we won't get too much into it on this one, but we'll get into why certain types tend to mistype as INFP.
Ooh, that's the fun part.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that like ISFJ is a big one.
Oh yeah, it's a huge one.
Yeah, maybe even some ESFJs who think they're introverted too. But I would say, yeah, mainly like ISFJs.
Oh, on that note, I know an ESFJ guy who thinks he's ENFP, so right. I mean, I don't know what's with
and
the
an
ESFJ
woman who thinks she's ENFP, right? So a big part of that is actually, I think, just the general picture of INFPs that are painted. Like,
oh, it's so appealing to SI, right?
Yeah. Like INFPs are supposed to be sentimental and like poetic and like, yeah, really good nature to people. And this is actually so like SIFE, the way that a lot of INFP descriptions are.
Oh yeah, there's something inherently wrong with the INFP descriptions on a lot of popular sites. That's one. Like even the healer really?
Right.
Like on 16 Types.
ISFJ is like the healer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like if you think of this, okay, I don't think this is offensive. Like picture like a nurse in your mind. What is the type of that nurse? ISFJ, like so obvious. Yeah. I don't know how like we became the healers of MBTI. Is very inaccurate.
And yeah, and ISFJ get a lot of dry adjectives like traditional or like routine oriented or like the upholders of stable routines or society or things like that. And of course they're not going to relate to that and be like, oh yes, I'm this like idealist who like is sentimental and
see, who's more likely to have beautiful stationery and actually like keep a dream journal or diary every day, ISFJ or INFP? ISFJ, of course! Of course this ISFJ is organized enough to have like pretty pink paper and like actually do the things.
I think I realized why this is. I think a lot of times really strong developed SI might seem to the user like it's an E. because it actually can cover so much breadth. I know. Okay, but hear me out. I think I know why so many SFJs think they're NFPs.
Okay.
And it's because, yeah, SI just is like collecting a lot of factual information, but the factual information, of course, is kind of structured in a more sensory way. But when they're actually going into a topic in depth, they have so much information that they can bring to their disposal that it might just feel like it's extroverted intuition jumping from one topic to another. But it's actually just this depth of knowledge that they have, right?
Yeah, and don't forget that they have NE as their aspirational function.
Yeah. So I guess in comparison, NE is probably a lot more skimming the surface, or like high NE users probably skim the surface a lot more than high SI users. In that sense, probably high SI users are more kind of like intellectual or academic because they just...
Oh, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, because they just have all this knowledge, and they can often, like, that's the thing, that's a whole, it goes back to like the whole negative stereotypes against fencers too, right?
Sure.
Like SI users can often have like very intellectual, very original analysis of like a lot of different subjects, or just go into depth into one subject very, very well. But NE is just way more exploratory. It'll just kind of join one topic to another topic to another topic. I guess this comes very naturally, right? It's not, yeah. So it focuses less in one area and more has a very wide breadth. Both of them have this natural tendency to kind of explore, but I guess it's just this very different process of exploring. So I think that's why a lot of SJs, probably coupled with the fact that SJs have all these horrible stereotypes against them, will feel like they're NPs. And also, I think INFJs sometimes can think that they're INFPs, or the two types might not be sure which one is which. So we just did a video on looking into FI and FE in depth, and looking into like also subconscious FI and subconscious FE, and the FJs and FPs and how they manifest. So that video will probably help.
Yep.
Yeah, so I've seen on YouTube videos, or just even like on forums when people have videos of themselves, that they're people who think they're INFP, but they're usually, sometimes they're ISTJ or INTJ. And I think this is because what you were kind of talking about earlier, that like sometimes our lower functions are what we actually value more than our higher functions, or they're kind of like aspirational and we enjoy using these functions because it's kind of fun for us. So I think this is the case with ISTJs and INTJs, right? They'll have, well, especially ISTJs, it's all the same cognitive functions, but they'll have lower FI and NE, and they'll really relate to these cognitive functions and really value them, and then they'll identify with this INFP persona, again, probably because ISTJ profiles are probably like the most boring profile ever.
Okay, perfect example of this is like when I do something that's TE, I'm so proud of it. I'm like, I want to brag to everyone that I did this thing, and like, look at me, I can use TE, I am logical, yes me. So I imagine that maybe like a lot of TJs, when they do stand up for their feelings, like to stand up for their values, or like successfully emotionally navigate a scenario, they're like, yes, I have my feelings, I'm a feeler.
Yeah, no, I totally relate to that. When I'm like starting to develop my FI, like it feels so good, and it's just like this moment of like rejoice. And
whereas like feelings are a burden to me, and it's just like constant. I don't even think about it, but I think about the times that I use my thinking, and I'm like, yes.
Yeah, and even with INTJs, like I guess they're already maybe intuitive, so they think they're an intuitive type, and maybe when they use their FI and SE, they feel like, oh yes, look at how INFP I am. But no, a way to differentiate this is because these TJs will probably relate to their FI quite strongly. So TJs will be thinking about what their FI values are for very practical reasons with which they can then execute with TE. So that's, I think, for me, it's like I'm thinking about my FI values in terms of like my life goals and stuff like that, but I won't probably sit and just analyze my feelings or analyze my values towards any specific situation that I encounter, like an INFP probably will, right? So the last one I have is NTPs sometimes think they're INFP, and usually this is like male NTPs too, which is interesting. So I feel like male NTPs might feel isolated or ostracized from our culture in some ways, like maybe both work culture and maybe even like kind of dating culture expects men to be more like TJs. So since they're not TJs, they're like, oh, I'm the opposite, I'm like FP, but they're actually like TP. Plus, with ENTPs, I feel like they can have well-developed FE, and again, as their third function, FE might feel kind of like a playful, creative function to them, so they might enjoy kind of exploring these values and like using their feelings to affect other people and things like that, and that makes them feel like they're a dominant feeler.
For the INTPs who think that they're INFP, the ones that I've encountered are not really using the cognitive functions, they are just using like the dichotomies, and then you're either thinking or feeling. So a lot of times with INTPs, when they're in a really stressful scenario, they might be really sensitive to their own FE, and generally just not knowing how to navigate FE but being really self-conscious about it, and also having it as an aspirational function. You know, you think of like an INTP at a party, they might like know that they're supposed to interact but then have trouble doing it, so all these sensitive feelings might trigger them to think that they're actually a feeler, and then when you're doing those tests that don't really talk about the functions, I think that they're not INFP.
Yeah, and this is another kind of thing about how these tests might conflate actual feelings with the MBTI term feeling, right? So so they'll be like, oh yes, I have all these feelings, I'm a feeler, and it's like, yeah, of course you have feelings, you're human.
Yeah, everyone has feelings.
But on the cognitive function side, you might have an internal judgment function that is more rational as opposed to like more ethical or value-based, I guess. FI users might have preferences that maybe don't have like as much justification, whereas maybe TI users usually have a very rational, logical justification for like all of their desires or preferences.
True.
So that might be a good way to determine between those two types.
Yeah, okay, like to build upon that, sometimes I have all these reasons, but the reasons are self-referential. It's kind of like, I like this because when I was 4 years old, my dad bought something that was kind of like this, so it makes sense to me, and that's all that matters. So there's no external reference point.
And I feel like a TIFE axis is a little bit more universal, right? So they'll try to find some ultimate logical truth behind why something is ultimately good or why something should be valued. So yeah, it's a little bit less
individualized.
Yeah, so let us know if what we said was helpful for figuring out if you're an INFP or one of these other types that are commonly mistyping as INFP.
So hopefully many of you have figured out that you are not actually an INFP by the end of this video.
Well, we hope that maybe some of you have helped figure out that you either are an INFP or maybe you can explore that you're one of these other types that kind of seem to fit for you.
So polite, Alex. I'll be making more videos like how to know that you're actually an INTJ, for example, and the common types that mistype as INTJ.
Yeah, we'll continue with the series. So let us know which types you want to see next. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy our content, please consider pledging your support on Patreon so we can keep making these videos for you guys. And we'll see you next time.